Hello, William. Thank you so much for joining our podcast. Let's talk about data. This is our first meeting. I would like to have you introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. What are you doing? I can see you are very active on LinkedIn as well. Tell us about your background.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm right now I work at ZS Associates. I lead their data strategy advisory services practice, which means that especially for any non-pharma clients, so across any sort of medical technology, financial sector, health plan sector, et cetera, like any sort of data strategy or data governance advisory services project, like that's the kind of the team that I lead now there. And I spent all my working life now, well over a decade, kind of in this world of data. I spent a decade at Deloitte doing this before. I started out my life as a corporate strategy consultant, right? So like really focusing on the highest level strategic decisions, but then those decisions more and more started to be decisions about data, right? Like being able to have kind of the right data to drive their strategy to, beat the competition and have the right competitive results. And so I worked for many years for a number of chief data officers, and that's kind of what pulled me into data, and that's what I've kind of ever been doing ever since. So yeah, it's great to be here. Great to be here, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much for accepting our invite. So I think you have touched base this TDU role, right? And our topic today is about connection between data governance or data management with the inception of this AI era, right? AI is there since long, right? We had this data mining, then we started calling it data science, then AI comes in, then this generative AI comes in, now agentic AI comes in. End of the day, it's all machine learning, right? So bringing this CDU role as well into the picture, because there are a lot of discussions happening right now that how CDU role will evolve, because we all know that CDO role is one of the most fragile role as of now. As per Gartner and few other surveys, it's around 18 to 12 months a CDO changes, right? And
Yep.
that's survey before agentic AI came in. Now suddenly agentic AI comes in. So how do you see? First, let's talk about the combination of this data governance and management with AI, and then we'll jump on to CDO. Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you already introduced, hey, it's AI now, but there were other things before. May happen to be agentic AI and generative AI right now, and I couldn't agree more. Like that's something that we've seen as well in the past. Like it may have been, a big data wave, and then it was a cloud wave, and then it wasn't even necessarily always on the AI plane, but it was kind of like, hey, what's kind of this newest technology out there, and how are we going to almost hop onto that bandwagon to make sure that it can help drives the right business results. And like before, like it was with big data, like it was with cloud journeys, like it was with let's say the previous AI analytics let's say waves, data is still the number one kind of enabler, or let's say the opposite, right? Inhibitor. It can't, like you can't get it done because the data is not there for you to use it. And I think that's kind of the easiest way to think about it. Like if you have all the data that you would require and you have it nicely available, like you know what data you have, you know where it sits, you know how it's classified, you know how to get access to it. You kind of have an idea if you can trust it. And but in a general sense, it's available and it's integrated and you can use it, then any AI is almost like the implementation is a joke. It's very easy. It's like right there. It's like that is actually the foundational thing is, do I have that data available? Is it appropriate to use it for the let's say the use cases that we have in mind? Can I rely on it? That's kind of the number one kind of big enabler, and like that hasn't changed. Like that was the case in the previous waves. That is the same today. if I might want to make one difference that at least I feel how I feel it's different, and it makes me sound very old, like I was there in the same mind for the previous waves. But I do think that data governance and data management are given a more appropriate attention now. Like I feel like because if you think about like it's not data governance in and of itself that you want or really need. It's that data that you really want, right? You want to have the data and it's available, you trust it, etc. That's what you really want. And I do feel that um, let's say in the last, 10, 20 years, like the textbooks were written based on the experiences in the sectors that were being regulated very heavily, right? So like financial sector, for example, or healthcare sector, that's where a lot of the data governance kind of textbooks were written because that's where the money and the funding came from. Like I feel that has changed, at least also in my experience in the marketplace. Like now you see companies in, consumer packaged goods, in retail, in transportation, in technology. I said you see other companies now truly getting to that point that they need to invest and take seriously this theme of data governance and data management, and it not being something that we'll just do side of desk, right? That's at least how I'm seeing it, and that's hopeful. And yeah, so that's what I spend most of my time on.
Yeah, so you are absolutely right, sir. Right, you have raised a very critical point over here is that all these waves, we talk about data science, we talk about data mining, we talk about machine learning, we talk about whatever AI is. But end of the day, what all these give you, it's data actually. End of the day, it's data. It's a different ways to manipulate data, to enrich data, to use data, to make decisions on data. It's a different ways of doing it. And you would agree, right? The shortest time spent for every new technology was, I think, generative AI, because
Yep.
generative AI just came last year and suddenly it's gone, right? Last time, data science was there for 10 years, data mining was there for long. Then this big data came in, I think it stayed for 5 to 7 years. Suddenly, this generative AI comes and wow, it's gone within a year, right? The all buzzword is gone, right? So now you're right that this data governance, people started looking into it because, see, my point of view is agentic AI suddenly comes and start telling people that, hey, agent will do everything for you, but agent will do what? It will still do data
That's
management.
right.
And when it do automated data management, you need a proper data governance over there. So when
Yep.
you leave a robot to do something, you need parameters to manage that, right? So how do you see this automated data governance or regulatory bodies coming towards with the era of agentic AI?
Um, I think that if you think about the compliance and the regulatory angle, I think that you'll see what happens, has happened before here as well. This pattern of like they're not quite sure either yet, right? They're not quite sure either how it's going to work, how companies are going to use it. And unfortunately, probably a couple of disasters are going to have to happen before they're going to come in and say, well, this is what shouldn't happen, right? And this is how we're going to have regulated even better now. That's not entirely like this, right? If you look in Europe where they have the AI Act, like they are trying to put some guidelines on there around like appropriate use of AI, which Gen AI falls under. It shouldn't be no different. Like it almost shouldn't matter to me, if it is a generative AI that is trying to, run an analysis or make a decision, or it is a different kind of AI, it is the same type, even if it's just a human being going through its steps, like the data that you're using, or you're supposed to use it for an appropriate purpose, unbiased, in line with let's say the regulatory frameworks. It's just the point is that with AI and generative AI, like you're able to do it much faster, right? You can scale it, right? So if you put out a model there that is, let's say, interacting with your customers in some one way or another, if it gets a certain pattern wrong, like within an hour, a million people may have suffered from it. Versus if it's, an individual in a customer contact center, like you could kind of, that still happens, right? I mean, I was on the phone earlier this week with an airline company, and I don't think what was recommended there was like quite appropriate, but I mean, it's like a drop in a bucket. It just happens at one time. It's not like a skilled, like the impact is very isolated. And I think that's where I think you're going to see some of this regulatory and compliance oversight develop. It'll be different by countries, right? And by region. I think that in some regions, like they may be very, um, they may be take some time, as I said, like they probably like with kind of the privacy legislation where GDPR was very much leading. Like the Europe came out, they were here, they came out with a legislative requirements first, and then the rest of the world followed, and that's what happened there too. I think something similar is going to happen here, and yeah, and then I think there are opportunities as well for some of these regulatory bodies to actually collaborate with a lot of organizations and to kind of help step through this together. Like I actually, if I may mention one anecdote here, like many years past almost, like I spent time in the financial sector, and we're working on, let's say, the credit risk models that were being developed there, and so that's a very regulated, piece of part of the sector, especially because of those financial crises that happened previously, where the banks weren't necessarily, intending harm, but like the models they had weren't predicting kind of the risks that were actually being taken. And so what happened is that, a lot of these folks from regulatory bodies, they start to work with the banks to make sure that, like, tell me how these models work. I will need to understand it so that I can actually like appropriately evaluate if they're doing what they're supposed to do. Like I was there, like we were working with the representative from the government to basically make sure that they understood how it worked, and then we made sure that it was fit for purpose. And I think there's an opportunity here as well. And I also, by the way, think that there's an opportunity for these regulatory bodies to actually be a little bit more assertive. Like I think what I just said, like sometimes I feel it's a little bit cowardish to almost just stand on the sideline, wait for something to go wrong, and then step in and go to say what is right or what's wrong. Like I think there are some cases now where I think there's a pretty decent idea that we feel something is not supposed to happen with this generative AI. So say it, put some framework around what the fines will be and how you're going to regulate it. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I guess some disaster will have to happen.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you have been talking to a lot of CDOs, right? So how
Uh-huh.
do you see adoption of this AI? When I say AI, do share with us how this generative AI, because traditional AI was there. Data science practice, everybody have separate department for data science. So it means AI is there in a certain level. Tell us about how organizations are adopting or adapting generative AI and agentic AI, because agentic AI just came in last December. In last 3 months, people are still talking about it. Do you see organizations going into an R&D mode, or they are trying to do some POC or pilots on it?
So for chief data, let's look at chief data officer specifically then, right? So first thing up front is that like the scope of a chief data officer is not always the same. Actually, a lot of companies still don't actually have one, right? And so sometimes that is actually part of the problem, right? But it's kind of that one role that is like not formally owning a lot of this stuff, but it's fine where they all come together, right? The data components, technology components, those analytical use cases, the business processes. But let's assume you do have one. Then still, like you see that there's different types of chief data officers and their respective offices and the scopes they own. And just for the sake of simplicity, let's kind of look at two types of work that they might, or scope that they might own. So one is the more traditional, let's say, data world, right? So it talks about the foundational capabilities that relate to data governance, to data cataloging, to data quality, compliance sometimes too, but basically taking all these foundational data capabilities and making sure that we have an awareness of where the organization is, and making sure that you invest in those in such a way that you help the broader organization increase its maturity. And so that's probably not the most interesting part that you just asked about, but it's still part of a CDO's, many of them, of their mandate. And so what happened with here generative AI, agentic AI, is it just puts a bigger demand on this, right? We talked about it earlier. So that's like where a lot of chief data officers are now looking at these same foundational capabilities, but they finally are a little bit better able to make that business case work, right? And so, and one final thing I wanted to just about that category of scope is that they do take generative AI as well and apply it to these foundations. So it's not only that let's say you need data governance, data cataloging, data quality for agentic AI to work or for generative AI use case to work. Actually, a lot of the generative AI makes data governance work, right? I do this now every day. Like if I would, the data governance that we're doing, data quality work that we're doing every day today is utterly different than 5 years back. And that's for the most part because of generative AI, like how so quickly you can understand what data you have, what the definitions are, what the quality, the quality test should be. So that's one part how CDOs are looking at it. Then the other part is more around like whether or not they own the analytics agenda, right? And whether or not they own the AI part. And so that's a very tough one, right? Because the previous one that I just mentioned, there isn't really anyone who usually owns that naturally in the company, and nor do they really want to, right? They tend to be like a leader on the business side, or they're somewhere in a function, and they do need data, but they don't necessarily want to own, let's say, a catalog or a data quality agenda for the broader company. That's like almost more of a burden. But AI is different. Like that's where you see that a lot of business and functional teams, they want to do it. They want to use it. In fact, they probably some of them have, the chat GPTs open on their windows when they probably shouldn't just yet, right? But that's where CDOs are very different. And so there's a lot of demand. There's impatience. There's a belief on, depending on the sector, that if we don't do this now, like we will be behind, we will be wiped out, right? And so there's a different way that CDOs are trying to, if they own that agenda, like how they're trying to do that. And they're doing that by also taking a look at these foundational capabilities still. Like they try to help influence, what when we say AI or generative AI, like how can we bring that into the company and help these different federated teams to kind of make better use of that. That's kind of one of the ways that they're trying to do that, like make sure that it's like properly controlled, that the licensing is in place, that not, let's say, your different business units are going in an entirely different direction, but are kind of hopefully sharing some of these best practices and you're kind of helping them with each other. But I think, and I think there's also some kind of variation of the chief data officers where they have their hands on actual use cases sometimes, like where they say, like, I will help, often in collaboration with, a leading business unit or functional team. They will try to take a use case and actually drive it all the way to operationalization. Um, but I think it would go too far to say that the CDOs tend to own it, right? That's just not the reality. Like if only because for a lot of these true AI cases, like that are kind of rooted in different business processes to work, like you need that business affinity. You need to know exactly what you're trying to do, and so for a CEO to own that is a struggle. And I don't think they do today. And I personally also don't think they should going forward. Like I don't think that there should be a big central team that should own all of these agentic AI or these use cases. I think that's where they should be more in an enabling role. But like I think you said somewhere in the introduction or a little bit earlier back, like CDO still, like they have short tenure. They don't, it's very hard for them to come in and within a year or two, analyze what's going on, figure out what they can do, and being able to communicate back a quantified business case to the people who are funding their office. It's hard. It's a tough role. So
Yeah, see, from my point of view, what I've seen and talked to a lot of people, right? Because I'm in data industry for last 20 years, of course, and I've taken a journey from a database administrator to an ETL to a solution manager modeler, and I've gone through all those things, right? And I've seen all these CDO roles. As you correctly mentioned, most of the organizations do not have a CDO role. They have director of data or maybe head of data, all those kind of roles, right? And these roles are mostly driven as an IT team rather than someone who can really support business use cases. When we say IT, right? IT means you have a car, your engine screws up, you simply give to a mechanic, just fixes. Mechanic doesn't care. Mechanic simply will open the engine, put a piston over there, that's fixed. Doesn't care. The owner need to drive 1,000 miles or 100 miles, doesn't care. That's what IT
Right.
is. But I think CDO role, I think that's one of the reason why CDO keeps changing in 18 to 24 months is because they were more focused. Hey, business says I need data. So CDOs were saying, okay, I will build a data warehouse. Whether it's useful or not useful, work with project managers. I think that's a wrong approach. CDOs need to understand the business as well. And when they are building this foundation need to build based on the business requirements. So I'm a big advocate that when CDO comes, maybe I'm a little bit biased because if I'm a data side, I feel CDO has to have a data background. I do see 90 or 95% CDOs don't have a data background. They are
That's right.
very good in storytelling. They are very good in use cases. So they talk to business. They say, hey, business, we can build this for you. Now they go back and give it to their execution teams. That is where the gap comes. Because when you give it to your execution team, what they will do? Either they will build a bill in Mon 3NF, they will build a star schema XYZ, but they don't care about entities. They don't care about
Uh-huh.
those gaps are there actually because CDOs are not data background CDOs, right?
So
What is
that's interesting. Maybe so if you say like data background, like how would you interpret that? Like what is a data background for you,
okay?
if I may ask?
Yeah. When I say data background, a data guy need to understand what data model is. First thing, data model, because it's a data, right? Secondly, need to understand how ETL is being handled, how
Uh-huh.
processing happens, right? How, and then how it is served. So majorly there are three parts. Integration is also there, security also, all those things are there. But end of the day, you need to process the data, you need to host the data, and you need to serve the data. If these
Yeah.
three pieces you do not know, okay, let me give you another example. If there is an organization, a small SME organization, they need a data warehouse, and they because when you create a data solution, you need to look into a lot of perspective, right? You need to look into the cost recovery model. You need to look into infrastructure. Is a cloud, is on a lot of things. Now, an organization is an SME, and they say, "Hey, we are an SME organization. Our cost comes from C department. We are not going to charge departments for their projects. So you will end up creating Will and Mon 3NF where everything is unified. All will go to one department, right? But when you go a little bit higher, where hey, whatever you will build, you have to charge back each department, each LOB or whatever it is, right? Or each product owner. Then your whole architecture change, your whole data model change, your whole
Uh-huh.
data product pipeline changes. So until unless, because you see, there are three NF, there is star schema, there is data vault, there is focal point modeling, there is anchor modeling, there are many modeling, there is semantic layer, there is hooks, there is Papini bridge, there are so many models there which are based on then FCO IM, right? Communication model. Then graph is becoming very famous nowadays. Graph theory, right? So all these things, if data guy is not there, you know, then gaps will always be there. That's my perspective. Maybe I have a bias on it, but what do you think?
No, no, because like I've spent a lot of time trying to find people, talent, like both for my own teams as kind of the different like this business is booming. There's so much to do, and we just not the people who have let's say who check the right ideal boxes, and then like every single client that I've worked with in the last 10 years, every single one has had open vacancies in their respective teams with kind of this profile that kind of combines like two or three things together. Like I think some of the things that you talked about, you kind of go into almost a technology playing around, knowing enough of like how it works, like what type of technologies are there, which kind of topics are important. Like once you really get to the CDO level, I don't think you need to have hands-on keyboard anymore, right? But
No,
you
no,
kind of
no.
still
But
need to know
yeah,
enough.
but basics need to be there. What I'm trying to say is basics
Yeah,
need to
yeah. But like it's also like when you when you work with your technology colleagues, like they need to take you seriously, right? And so if you and that's a big deal. Like if you come in and you just start kind of, echoing some of these business demands without kind of accounting for sometimes the complexities that, are kind of in the technology landscape, then you're just not taken seriously. And that's kind of an issue. The other side is the business side, which is extraordinarily important, right? Because if a CDO doesn't have this business side to it, then you're just an IT guy, right? Then you're no different. You're just sitting, you're just a connect capability, somebody who brings that capability to the organization. And then I do feel as well, like I think I was hearing from you as well. There are these real data things, quote unquote data things around like a data model, some of these foundational capabilities that really aren't owned either by IT nor the business, but they kind of stretch between them, right? We talked about some of these topics, governance, the cataloging part, like, and so the problem here is that there isn't really a really good pipeline of like master degrees to do this stuff. Like there's millions of systems engineerings and things like that. There's millions of business degrees. They have that real data focus. Like if you really start to look at them, some of them they do talk about it, but like they don't really cover these unique areas that we just talked about. And so what you'll see in practice is that any chief data officer, without exception, tends to come from, one of the following backgrounds. Like one, technology, like they were in the IT organization, but they really built a reputation to be able to make things happen, really. And so they eventually got into a CDO spot. The business, like where they were owning different, same thing. They were doing something more with usually with some sort of analytical edge to it that eventually qualified them for the business role. And I would say a third part is it can be like a legal or compliance, depending on the sector. That happens too, right? Where if the governance component is much the defensive data governance or data enablement is stronger than the offensive one, the priority, that happens too. And so you'll see invariably is that any chief data officer spikes in some of these areas and not so much in the others. That it's almost inevitable. And so that's a big question for them. Like, how do you then configure your team so that you do have the right kind of credibility on all of these topics within the team, so that you can still make those connections across the enterprise? Because if you can't do that, like as that time is running out, right? 2 3 years, and they'll come. There's another budget round coming up, and time will run out. So
you're absolutely right, right? Let's go a little bit more deeper into this CDO thing, right? Because we are talking about how data governance and data management will be hit by or moved by or matured by AI, right? So talking further on CDO role, right? As you correctly mentioned, for me, traditionally, actually, in data world, either you have data governance or you have data management. You have two pillars. I feel that CDO need to get hold of both. And data governance is traditional. We have metadata, we have security, we have lineage, we have regulatory, all these. This is for me is the one pillar. The second pillar is management. Within management, I categorize into further four pillars that a CDO need to have look onto all those products, first of all, which are on shelf.
uh-huh.
Because as Gartner says, 70 to 80% projects are sitting on shelf, right? It's a new fancy word of failure. They call it's sitting on a shelf. They don't call it failure, right? So CDO need to really look into it, that 70, 80% product which are sitting on a shelf, what to do with that. Second pillar, which I call it, which is sub dimension, I call it, those which are in the product but having challenges. They were very good in pilot. They were very good in POC. They went into production very good. The moment they scale up, problems started coming in. ROI is not meeting. So that's a second sub dimension CDO need to look into it. Under data management. Third one is all those use cases which business knows, but they are not sure about the technology. Because technology is moving so fast, as we were just discussing, that Gen AI, generative AI came and went off. What about those organizations which started investing millions and they are now in the middle, right? Now someone has to resign, right?
Yep.
And suddenly agentic AI comes. Now the fourth sub pillar, which I called is all those use cases which business doesn't know, because business is very busy in their business. Now CDO role, as you correctly mentioned, need to know a little bit business. For me, CDO need to know 20 to 30% of business, or maybe make it 40%, and rest technology and all other pillars I talk about. So this fourth sub pillar, CDO will look into the global world and see, hey, let's say financial sector, banking sector, hey, there's a new use case comes, hey, my organization business is so busy, they are not aware of it. So they propose to business, hey, why not we implement it? So business do not know the use case, neither the technology. So I look into these four now AI comes, right? Now when this agentic AI comes, this will change the whole horizon, because all these things agentic AI will automatically tell you. Now, how to manage it if CDO is not aware of all these things, right? I
Yeah.
personally feel they are going to doom further as this agentic AI comes in. What do you think?
So the part that I like about what you just mentioned and we haven't really talked about yet is data products yet, right? So that's kind of this it's similar to some of these AI waves. They almost find a different word for it and somehow it takes off again. Even though if you really start to look under the hood and say, what are we really talking about? Not really new, right? It's not that any individual component of a data product we haven't done before. We have. It's just kind of you and I deliberately use the word, right? Mesh together some of these new these concepts and somehow it takes off again. And so the part that I have seen be very powerful for chief data officers here is that they instead of really telling their story about, look at my catalog, right? How beautiful it is, or look at this quality dashboard, is that they actually start talking about a portfolio of data products. Like that's almost instead of saying I have, 10,000 data quality rules, I have 25,000 metadata fields. Business is like, so how's that going to help me? I don't, great, I don't, so now how do I get my data, right? So for this particular use case. So what is very powerful if you can say, here's 27 data products that are currently in the company, like they are using, 35 data sources, but they are supporting a total set of 127 use cases, which are driving or connected to $2 billion of revenues and let's say $500 million of cost efficiencies. Now that wakes people up. Now you make it very real. You can show, look at my, product master that I've not now have, and I can have this, automatically feed e-commerce catalogs, and I put a generative AI layer on top of it so that all my products can now be broadcasted in any country, in any language like that, right? Because you have a data product, for example, or they can be internally oriented too about data about your employees or maybe like the financial data for your reporting. But if you change that kind of narrative away from these big foundational investments towards look at this portfolio of data products, then I think you get a very powerful story for a chief data officer to narrate, like what are we doing, why are we doing it, and what is the actual impact we have. And then the let's say comment I wanted to make here is related to what you laid out in your second bucket of data management and the different pillars you mentioned around, some things who may be on the shelf and some things who are there, they're not working, etc. So data products, like the nice benefit they have is that they kind of come with a certain understanding of what they are and how you can evaluate their success. And so we worked in the last year on a kind of standardized way to measure their maturity. And so what you can do as a chief data officer, now I just mentioned, I think 27 data products, and the number doesn't matter, but so if you have a quick way of scanning these data products and figuring out so what's working and what's not working across them, because it tends to be the case that some of them work very well, but that there are some foundational things that are missing, which is why a couple of these can't really reach that potential. And so now this becomes very, very powerful, because now as a CDO, you can say of these 27 data products, let's say for 12 of them right now, data quality is an issue because of these 2 or 3 upstream systems. Now, you asking for $1 million budget just became so much easier, because you can say, like, I need this money for this particular, let's say we did the homework, right? So like there's a certain approach and maybe technology, but we want to address these data quality concerns because it would directly impact these source systems, which feed these 10 data products, which again feed, let's say, 50% of the revenue potential we just mentioned. Like, that's a totally different chief data officer than the one who's like building a name by saying, look at my catalog.
Yeah, see what happens. There was a discussion happening. One of the US big company had around 1,700 data products. So they were very proud of it. End of the day, I heard, I won't name anyone,
Uh-huh.
we heard the rumor that 40 to 70% products were not fulfilling the ROI. But the thing is, as there was a complete ROI of the whole budget, so even though for 50 to 60% products were not matching or doing the ROI, but 40% was generating so much that
Uh-huh.
end of the day, it was revenue generation. So in fact, they could save the 60% of those products cost. But as it was a traditional management or governance of the whole ecosystem, you could never know because it never goes in, right? So that is there. So yeah, so that's a lengthy discussion, but let's touch base this data product as well. By the way, we have a checkpoint. We have 15 minutes left. We'll try to wind up on data products. As you correctly mentioned, suddenly with the uh, agentic AI, this data product surfaced again, and it's not something new. If you have,
Yeah.
if it is an enterprise data warehouse, it's a product, of course. So I was discussing someone or the other day when they were saying, tell us what is data product, whether a requirement can be categorized or data product or non-data product as well. So I told them, product is a product.
Yeah.
Either it's a good product, whether it's a bad product. Once you create a data product, and you have a reporting, it is a data product. Now, whether it is meeting the requirement, it is meeting the ROI, all those you can question, right? And I think this concept came from data mesh. People confuse data mesh concept with data product because data mesh was giving the autonomy and power to the domains. It has nothing to do with data product. Data product comes as a byproduct because they wanted to build data products inside the domains and which can connect to
Correct.
each other. That's a separate discussion,
Exactly.
right? Now, what is data product, right? So data product is a data product. First of all, we have to categorize. There is OLTP world and there is a OLAP world. So now when we are talking about data product means in OLTP, we generate data. In OLAP, we serve data. So two different pieces. When we serve data means the product which are built are based on data. So data is their oil or gold, whatever people are talking nowadays. Based on a data, when a product is made, it's a data product in the OLAP world, right? Now, people says, can one dashboard be a data product? A complete enterprise warehouse can be a data product. I'll give you an example. Tell me your perspective as well. So the example which I gave to my colleagues, right, and friends, I told them a car. A car is a product, right? Within a car, there is an engine, there is a battery, there is other components. All those components make one car as a product, but if you take out a battery, put it aside, it is also a product for a battery company, which
Right. Exactly.
goes into a car to make the car run and many other things. So on itself is a product, but without in a car, it's a product just for a company. So if you have a bigger data product, each components can also be called a data product. Like you create a data model, right? A data model is can be used by other parties other than the dashboard or requirement which you have created. If someone else is pulling, yes, it can be called as a data as a product, not application data product. What do you think about the definition of data product, Vic? That is where I'm coming to. How do you see new organizations are coping up this concept of or definition of data products?
Yeah, great question. It's many projects where we start this type of work. We actually try to actually align on a definition that works for the respective company because it will just it will just cause confusion or let's say interpretations that are different. So for me, there's a couple of things that go into the definition of a data product, right? And I'll try to keep it simple, but for the most part, there is like it has a lot of data involved. It is a reusable digital asset, right? And it is cross-functional almost always. Like so that the thing is, if it's within, even if there's more uses of a different data, but it's within the same team, it doesn't really reach that kind of data mesh type of qualification of a data product because it doesn't really go across the mesh, right? It stays within a given part of or domain. And so it has to kind of be cross-functional across domain. It has to have reusable data within it. And then we can talk about the technical properties around, it being reliable, it's uniquely addressable, so you can find it, and there's a couple of others more. But I would maybe just like to comment a little bit on like recognizing that there's very different data products out there. Like sometimes like it's actually just near raw. Like there's just coming data coming from sometimes just one, like a big CRM platform or maybe a couple of them, and you organize it, you put it in a data warehouse, you make it available, and sometimes that's the data product. That's completely okay. And it's actually the vast majority of it, if you look at it, is just data with fairly simple kind of data processing on top of it. Then there's other data products where, I mean, there's a whole load of analytics layered into it already. For example, like it generates new data, it generates predictions, potentially even layers on top of UI that's considered part of the product, right? I think you mentioned dashboard, but let's say any sort of, UI that you can have with it can sometimes be considered part of that kind of your car, right? Your product. And I think that's okay. It's like what we help companies to do is to sometimes categorize them. Like sometimes like data products seem to be more source oriented, right? Those tend to be the ones that are more raw in a way. Like they have data, it's nicely formatted, it's reusable, but it's not necessarily like very clear yet what like there's could be a lot of use cases, but there's also a lot of work you still need to do. And so you can think about in the analogy you yourself used, like maybe battery packs, right? Those could be like there's maybe a very nice clean warehouse with battery packs, and like you can go and stick them in cars, you can stick them in, I don't know, phones. So I'm not the expert, but like you can put them in all sorts of different things. And then there's data products that are more use case or user oriented, right? And so that's where this might be, if we think about the car again, like maybe it's not quite the car yet because that's the individual user, but it's maybe, let's say, it's like a finished chair for a car or something. I don't know. Like these you can't put anywhere anymore. There's probably still a couple of cars that can reuse it, but there's only a few of those. And so you're much closer to the consumer. Like you've taken a lot of raw materials, you've transformed them a lot, and you've prepared them for very specifically identified use cases. And so when we think about, if we go back to the question around what's the definition of a data product, then I think all of these things have to go into it, right? It's reusable, it's cross-functional or cross-domain. It has to have data in it, like otherwise it's a product and not necessarily a data product. And then the last bit that I would love to focus on is not so much about like the solution of what it contains or does, but really about how it's treated. And that's really this product mentality, right? This product orientation. So the fact that there is somebody who's almost looking at this data product and thinks about it from the lens of a P&L, right? Like how can I drive profit? Or how can I drive impact with this product? Where what you have today might not be what you want to have next year. Like think back about the same example you just used. Like you may be thinking about the cars today, but like those will not be the cars that are going to be produced 2 or 3 years from now. And so even with from the data product, I feel an important dimension of its definition should be it's treated like a product, right? It's treated like its impact and its success are evaluated through the lens of the folks who are supposed to consume or buy it. And that's also how it should be managed. And so that means that there needs to be a certain like backlog or pipeline or something like that around it, recognizing that you may need to adjust to the demands of your respective users and consumers. That's maybe where maybe that's maybe where I'll leave it.
Yeah. So just on a closing note, right? I heard people saying that a data product, as you mentioned, should be a reusable product, right? But I think in reality, there will be data products which life is a long life, can be upgraded, can be matured, can be changed, can be reused for life. Example is data mart or data product. But example again, bringing up the example of a battery. Yes, you can recharge the battery, but there is a expiry date of a battery, right? Same
Uh-huh.
goes for data as well. There is always expiry of our data, right? In banking sector, I think the 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 retention period is around 7 years after the
Of that
customer leaves
itself.
the bank, right? So there's an expiry of that data component in a data product. So someone again coming back towards CDO, CDO has this role as well to look into the life cycle of the data product as well, which is expiring, which is not expiring, who's the business owner, who's the technical owner, because it saves a lot. Because okay, I think we have last 6 minutes. Let me throw this question. Let me cut down my talk because I'm also very passionate about data. Tell us, how do you see jobs impacting into the data world because of agentic AI? Last question from my end.
The jobs being impacted. I mean, so couple of different ways if we think about it. Like I feel if you look at agentic AI, like there's or generative AI, there's a couple different ways to think about the impact. And the first way is it just being a different like tool that everybody has access to. And I feel that any job anyone has almost out there is there's a broad how do I'm now I mean it is almost insane if you get a resume from somebody today and it has a spelling error or it's not like the wording is inconsistent, that me begs the question like that like why that if you can't even run something like that through like a freely available generative AI application, and then something's not right, right? So that there's something about this that it really increases the cleanliness and the like the speed, I would say, and the consistency of almost any work that we do that touches data, I think. Then that's maybe one how it impacts the jobs. I think if we go a little bit more towards the more applied, let's say not just the publicly applicable uses of these types of applications like I just mentioned, and you get more into specialistic roles who are interacting with these technologies, then I think for me, what I'm hearing a lot of clients talk about and what they want to know is um like how do you do intelligent data management? Like they don't want to like data is we all know the cliches. It's like, every 2, 3 years, the whole data state on the world is duplicating. We all know this. There's more data. There's the vast majority of unstructured data is not used. We all know it. It's almost like a fatiguing cliche by now, but like, how do you use and what's your perspective on using these generative AI or agentic AI to make this better, right? That's, I feel like, where a lot of jobs currently now are being created. That's where a lot of companies have budget for to create these types of roles as well. And so you having a practical view how these types of technologies can be brought to solve for some of these older solutions is something that I believe thousands of people across the world are going to be able to build a very successful career on. That's maybe let me maybe leave it at those two. I think those are two ways that I would, one again, just the cleanliness of everything we do, the way we like record our meetings, like send our emails, like do our research, it's all so much faster and quicker and consistent. It shouldn't be anyway. And then there's the more specialistic application of these, is specifically in the sense of how can you deploy those to, manage that complicated data estate that all these companies have. I think those are just maybe some two of many takes that you could have and how it could impact jobs.
Thank you so much, William. We can talk day and night. Both of us
That's
are
right.
very passionate data people. And initially, my session used to be 1.5 hour, 2 hour. Then we cut down to 30 minutes, even 15 minutes. But people ask, bring it back to 60 minutes. So now this is what we have. And I think it was a great session. We touched base, governance, management, AI, agentic. We touched base, CDO and data product as well. I think our audience will like this one. And I think this should not be our last session. I would love to have a follow-up session, maybe couple of
Sure.
quarters from here. And we can have a session to understand the impact post impact of agentic AI because right now
Let's do
agentic
it.
AI is very new. Yeah,
Let's do it. Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on and thanks for having the podcast. I know a lot of people are like learning a lot from it. So thank you for doing that.
like yeah. Have a nice day. Take care.
You too.
Bye bye.